Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Did a local salesman really encounter an alien on a road near Parkersburg, West Virginia in November 1966? What did the man's family think of his claims of ongoing contact with extraterrestrial beings, especially when they reportedly visited the family home? What did it all have to do with the broader paranormal events taking place in the Ohio Valley at that time?
Hey there, and welcome to the 220th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those opening questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad. But before we begin, it's time for a weekly paranormal contest. Oh, what fun. So our question from 2 weeks ago, since it's
last time we did a live show. Yeah.
Yes. So was, who was the oldest person ever to claim to be abducted by aliens?
Well, the answer was Albert Berthoud, reportedly abducted in 1983 at 77 years of age in broad daylight while fishing in a canal near Aldershot, England.
Well, nobody got that right, probably because it made it sound like who's the oldest person in, like how long ago was the oldest person?
Who's the oldest alien ever to abduct it?
No, I mean like how old were they? Like hundreds of years old? Like how old were the reports? You know, like maybe that's what they thought. I don't know.
Well,
so
nobody got the answer.
Yeah, so nobody got that right, and so let's try this again with this week's question. And in what American town is a famous ghost train supposedly heard every August 27th? Okay, so if you get that right, win an autographed copy of my dad's most famous book, Footsteps in the Attic, with almost said God's Ghost and Human Destiny. So call us locally. Yeah, I know. Call us locally at 401-766-1240 or nationally at 800-449-1240. So if nobody gets it before the show and you still think you have a shot, drop a line to me at bennettbehindtheparanormal.com. Oh yeah, it actually is working now. So if you haven't heard a reply, that's probably because it wasn't working for 3 years.
Oh yes, okay, that's it. So, but we're making progress. Taunia Derenberger Bowman is the daughter of Woodrow W. Derenberger, a man whom UFO lore says encountered the famous or infamous alien Indrid Cold on a West Virginia highway in 1966. Taunia lives in the Parkersburg area, West Virginia even today, and those events occurred nearby, and she's very willing to share the story from her perspective. Married and the mother of 5, Taunia is CEO of Bowman Publicity. She holds a bachelor's degree in business and is an avid football fan. While Taunia herself suffers from multiple sclerosis, she is a dedicated advocate for MS research and many other very worthy causes. She chairs her state's government relations committee for the National MS Society and represents West Virginia in doing federal advocacy work in Washington, D.C. each March, and much more. Tonight, though, she's going to talk about the strange incidents of her father and Indrid Cold.
Well, Taunia Derenberger, welcome back to Behind the Paranormal, or welcome to Behind the Paranormal, actually.
Do we have Taunia there? Or?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Button up there.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Very good. Taunia, are you with us?
Phone 1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're getting used to some buttons here. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we'll try and while we're waiting for our connection here. Essentially, the context of this is especially interesting. 1966 in the Ohio Valley was the beginning of a very, very interesting time. Oh, we got her? Okay. All right. Ben, do you want to go help him? All right. Yeah, Ben's going to jump in here. Our producer's a fabulous guy, but he's a little bit new here, and I wouldn't know how to push these buttons either. Anyway, in 1966 in the Ohio Valley, the Mothman incident, strange name, but the Mothman incidents were beginning. And this was the basis of the 2002 film, The Mothman Prophecy, starring Richard Gere and Laura Linney. And this occurred in the entire area of the Ohio Valley, particularly Parkersburg and Point Pleasant. And what happened was that a very strange creature by the press dubbed Mothman, it seemed to be a large, gray, very frightening entity with red eyes, was seen by a number of people. Have we got Taunia? Okay. All right. Taunia, are you with us?
Yes.
Oh, very good. Okay. Beginning to think we're like CBS here. I was just beginning to explain some of the Mothman incidents, but we'll start again with you. And I want to thank you, first of all, for joining us. I understand you are hospitalized at the moment.
Yes, I am. I had 2 strokes a week ago.
Oh, good heavens! Oof. Well, we're so sorry. We just went through a funeral in the family, so we're hoping that maybe this will be a little bit mutually therapeutic for us to talk tonight. Well, yeah. Taunia, Ben had welcomed you to the show, and Ben was going to start our questioning with the story that you have to tell us.
Yeah. So, what happened to your father the night of November 2nd, 1966?
Well, he was stopped by a large craft, and I'm not going to call it a UFO or a spaceship. Dad never really did. He was driving home. It was a rainy night. He was driving home from Marietta, Ohio, from a business call. He at that time he sold sewing machines and stereos, and he also repaired them. And he was driving home down I-77, and just before the Route 47 exit, he was stopped by a large craft, and a gentleman got out. The craft stopped actually in the middle of the road, and in the median. And a gentleman got out and started communicating with him telepathically.
Okay, what did this man look like?
Dad always described him just as the man that I had later on met, as kind of dark-skinned, almost Hispanic-looking. He was tall. He was probably, he wasn't quite as tall as my father, and rather slim, with slicked-back, dark hair.
Okay.
Okay, so how did you first hear about it? Did your father just start talking to you about it one day, or what?
Did you hear about it that night, or what happened?
No, I didn't hear about it that night. That night when my father finally came home to the farmhouse that we were renting in Mineral Wells, West Virginia, he was very shaken and white as a sheet. I mean, I had never seen my father that way. My brother and I were in the living room watching TV, and my mother was in the kitchen, and he went into the kitchen, and next thing I know, my mom comes in and tells my brother, she said, Greg, you take care of your sister, stay in here and watch TV, Dad and I have to talk. And that was the last I had heard about it that night, and Dad always tucked us in at night, and that night Dad did not tuck us in, so we knew something was up.
Okay. Well, the thing that strikes me, Taunia, about the I-77, and we've been to Parkersburg a few years ago, and this is not a country road. It's a major interstate highway. Would have been relatively new in 1966. Weren't there other people going by who might have seen this?
Actually, there were, and I have, well, of course, not with me, but at home, other eyewitness reports of people who saw the same thing.
I see.
And who saw this man talking to my father on the side of the road.
Really? Okay. Do we have a caller? Oh.
No, we don't.
Okay, we don't. I'm just...
The contest.
Oh, the contest. Okay. Well, we can... Ben, check that out while we continue to talk here with Taunia. Now, Taunia, according to what we've heard, that this Indrid Cold turned up not only on I-77, but he also turned up in your backyard a few days later with an alien friend named Carl Ardo. Is that correct?
Yes. But the neat thing about it is that the way they were dressed, and I don't know how they got there because there was no spacecraft in my yard or even near my home that I noticed. The neat thing that I think it's a neat thing now, is that at that time, after my father had reported it the very next day and had gone on local TV and had spoken about it on TV, there were all kinds of people around our home, and nobody noticed that they were there.
Wow. All right. Now, how did your father get on TV with this? How did the press find out?
My father went to the police, and of course from there it went to the local TV station from the police report.
Having been a reporter myself for many years, I can testify that your father certainly wasn't necessarily seeking publicity. One of the first things a newspaper reporter will do during the day is to go very early in the morning to the police station and look at the so-called police blotter, all the things that have occurred the previous day for something to report. And certainly that would have stood out because it's a matter of public record. So it's not necessarily as if your father was looking for publicity.
Right, and in a town as small as Parkersburg, it's everybody. Back then, everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew what everybody else was doing.
Like the whole state of Rhode Island.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I guess. Okay. We're going to take a little pause in our conversation with Taunia here because someone has correctly answered our question. That doesn't happen every day. And this is Scott from 617 area code. Did Scott say where he's from? That's the Boston area.
Well, it's Massachusetts.
Massachusetts, okay. All right. And Steve correctly answered where
Scott.
a ghost, I should say, Scott, you're Steve's the producer. You can win too, we'll give you a book. So, Scott correctly answered the question, which was Statesville, North Carolina, the location of this famous ghost train that shows up every August 27th. So, congratulations, Steve. I should say Scott. And one interesting little tidbit of information on this was this happened in 1891, terrible train wreck. And in 1991, on August 27th, a lot of people got together for the centennial of this event to try and hear the ghost train. And unfortunately, one of the people who was waiting to hear this was killed by a real train when it came around the bend unexpectedly. And so, in a way, sort of a tragic marking of, again, that terrible event in 1891. Scott, is Scott still on the line?
No.
Okay. Scott, we're going to ask you to call back and give our... Oh, the phone number's here. Okay. Actually, no, we'll call you later on, and we'll get your address as far as where to send the book. And thank you very much for calling, and congratulations on your win, and I'll be sure to sign that book for you.
Okay, so Taunia, I have a quick question for you. You were a little girl while this happened, and all this press information and all that, and people were paying attention to you. How did your friends react to this, or how did your classmates react to it?
Well, I didn't have any classmates. I was only 3 at the time.
Oh, then never mind.
I told you to study your math.
Sorry.
Yeah, my brother's classmates didn't take it too well. My brother got mocked, and then as I got older, of course I was always asked about it, even after we moved to Cleveland, Ohio, because of course my father went to different states and spoke at different, was asked to speak at different places. So he had spoken in Cleveland several times, so of course people up there knew the name.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now with Indrid Cold and this Carl visiting your home, did you, at the age of 3, I suppose you don't have much of a memory of this, but did you see them?
Oh, I have more of a memory than anybody would think. Yes, I did. And I can remember, because I was always the inquisitive type of child. I wasn't the type to stay in the background. While it frightened my brother, I was the type that, I had to be out there in front, see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Inquiring minds want to know, especially a 3-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yes, I do. And actually, Indrid didn't have any qualms about meeting me. My brother, on the other hand, kind of, I guess he always did. But Indrid didn't have any qualms about meeting me. The only thing that Indrid didn't want to do was frighten me.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of talking to me telepathically, because he was 3 years old, he really didn't think I would understand that, he actually spoke to me in a very low, hushed tone of voice.
Okay. Did he talk to your mother telepathically?
You know what? My mom and I never really discussed it a whole lot. Once my parents got divorced shortly after all of this started, Mom really didn't want to discuss much. It wasn't until Mom passed away in 2009 that right before that she would discuss any of it.
Okay. of course, the obvious question many listeners will ask is, how do you know these were really aliens?
Well, I guess I don't, except for the fact that I know that my father, all his life, never lied to me, and I don't believe that my father would ever lie to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I've read about him, and there is an ironic local connection here, strangely enough, to our little community of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, where this version of the show originates. And it's in a little magazine called Probe magazine from September 1968. And the gentleman who has the very popular talk show on this station before we do was the publisher of this magazine, our friend Joe Ferrier, who was well known in the community here and in the Blackstone Valley in New England. And Joe was a very well known UFO expert in the late 1960s. I think he knew your father in passing, if I'm not wrong. Didn't know him very well. Has not met you, of course, but was very interested when we mentioned to him that you were going to be our guest tonight. And he, much of the information that we have about your dad came from this article written by your father in Joe's magazine. And it's the name of the article is "I Met a Man from Another World." And again, very rare magazine, 1968. So that's how we did get some of the background in order to ask you these questions. So, let me ask you too. Did you communicate with this friend of Indrid Cold's? And again, you were not frightened. Do you remember your feelings at all? I know it's hard to remember after all those years, but so what I'm getting at is, as I say, people are still going to ask, was this really an alien? And maybe your father thought he was and he really wasn't. They're obvious questions. What say you? Right.
No, I was never frightened, and no, Carl really never spoke to me.
Okay.
He just kind of stood back in the background. But I have it on good authority from known ufologist Earl Neff, and that this really happened because he came down from Cleveland with some of his UFO group. That's how my mother and my brother and I ended up in Cleveland. But I have it, and John Keel also believes my father's story.
Okay. Well, that's what I was going to get into, too. I know Ben's got some more questions here, but just before I turn it back over to Ben, the film, The Mothman Prophecies, as I began to mention at the beginning of the show when we were connecting with you, the O2 film with Richard Gere and Laura Linney, the character of Gordon Smallwood, played by Will Patton.
It's not my father.
I'm sorry?
Was not my father.
Oh, no, I say it was supposed to have been based on your father, as
right.
I understand. And,
right.
I've read the book and I've read this, and it shows no resemblance whatsoever to me.
Right. John Keel, when that movie was being made, called me.
Well, let me just explain, sorry to interrupt, just to explain for people who don't know who John Keel is. John Keel was a New York journalist who in the late 60s was covering the story of not only Indrid Cold but also the Mothman incidents, which we'll get into shortly, in the Parkersburg, Point Pleasant area in the Ohio Valley. And he became a prominent author on the subject after he covered it as a reporter. So go ahead, Taunia, I'm sorry.
Right, yes. When they were making the movie, Mr. Keel called me. I had been in touch with Mr. Keel previously, off and on, and Mr. Keel called me and to tell me that they were making this movie and that they were going to take a lot of artistic license with the movie, and how they were writing this character of Gordon Smallwood in. But he said that when he spoke with the authors, the screenwriters, what he thought should be my father was the gentleman, Mr. Leek.
Oh, okay.
Because his character, of course, was being portrayed by Richard Gere, and Mr. Leek in there moved to a big city, which my father did, and talked about how it ruined his marriage, and he had started drinking and different things. So the character of Mr. Leek was actually what my father was supposed to be based on, but since the Indrid Cold stuff got mixed in there, it ended up people correlating Gordon Smallwood with my dad.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well that makes sense. Ben.
Okay, so during the whole time in the same area, the famous Mothman sightings were taking place. Do you see any connection between Indrid Cold and Mothman?
No, I don't. In fact, my father had never been to Point Pleasant. I do know that in the recent documentary, Eyes of the Mothman, the producer, Matt Kolowski, did put about a 20 to 30 minute piece in there about my dad and Indrid Cold and my dad's sightings.
Well, let me, Ben's got another question here, but let me just interject that I don't know how familiar you are with our show or with our work, but we operate on the premise in our own paranormal research, or as we like to call it, our cosmic journeying, that we are dealing with a universe that is not just a universe. It is an interactive dance, if you will, of multiple parallel worlds. And that when you have something like the Mothman incidents and all these different things seemingly unrelated occurring in a certain area, in this case the Ohio Valley, that you have a number of these worlds intersecting, okay? And this is based on quantum physics, or at least one interpretation of it. What say you to that? I mean, that it's these seemingly unrelated incidents, in our opinion, would have been related, according to that theory, in what's known as a paranormal flap, with all these things, UFOs, ghosts, and all this. What do you say about that? Do you think that's any sort of an impression you got, or was it strictly Indrid Cold with you in your situation?
I think it was strictly Indrid Cold with us in our situation.
Okay, and you had no Mothman. Oh, Ben was going to ask this, but Mothman incidents, ghosts, or
no.
Sorry, I'm always stepping on you.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
So to continue my question, actually, Men in Black or other paranormal phenomenon normally reported by people all over the Ohio Valley at the time?
Yes.
Because when we were there in 2003, we talked to a lot of people who had a number of incidents. I'm thinking of our mutual friend Susan Shepard, who said that they heard footsteps on their roof, for example, at the time. She was just a little girl, as were you, and red eyes at the window and this sort of thing, and allowing for public excitement over the press reports. Nevertheless, she said these things really happen. So, but none of that ever happened to you, huh? As far as extraneous events? Okay. Well, I guess you're lucky in a way.
Not that I can.
All right.
No, not that I can recall.
Okay. All right, so let's actually we're going to take a commercial break here right now, and we'll be right back with our good friend here, Taunia Derenberger, and we'll ask some basic questions about what might have been going on here in the incident of Indrid Cold in 1966. Stay with us.
Hi, Joyce Berreby here, member of the Woonsocket Elks. I want to tell you about the annual Children's Fishing Derby sponsored by the City of Woonsocket and the Woonsocket Lodge of Elks, which will be held on April 9th at Cass Park for children 12 years old and younger. The derby starts at 6 a.m. until 11 a.m. and awards will be handed out at 11:30. There will be prizes giving away throughout the morning in order to include as many children as possible. We will also be giving away a boys' 20-inch bike and a girls' 20-inch bike. There will be a drug awareness table set up by Hank Payette, Woonsocket Elks Drug Awareness Chairperson. We will be serving hot dogs, hot chocolate, soda, and coffee. So, to all you parents out there, if your children are 12 years old and under, come on down to Cass Park and register them for the Derby and have some fun. You may register the children at Parks and Recreation on River Street or at Pete's Tackle on Burnside Avenue. Elks members may register their children at the Elks Lodge at 380 Social Street. We are praying for good weather, but the Derby is on, rain or shine. So, mark your calendar, April 9th, 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. Thank you, and we hope to see you there.
You can depend on us for public service, ON Radio.
Okay, and welcome back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno on WON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com in New England's beautiful Blackstone River Valley. And our guest this evening is Taunia Derenberger. She is certainly well known in the UFO community, especially for her own work, and as the daughter of Woodrow Derenberger, who was the primary witness to the Indrid Cold alien incidents of 1966 in the Ohio Valley. Now, Taunia, one of the most fascinating aspects of this story is that Indrid Cold reportedly told your father that the people on his planet were descendants of people from Earth. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. As far as I know, that's an unusual twist for a UFO contact story from that far back. Can you comment on that? Have you ever learned any more about that?
No, unfortunately, I haven't. I've only actually come into contact with Mr. Cold once since my father passed away in 1990.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll want to find out about that. See, one of the things that we obviously try to be open-minded skeptics in a sense on the show, but one thing that kind of gives this story credence for me is that very unusual twist to this story. You might hear that today in science fiction, but way back in '66, as far as I'm aware, there was not too much talk of aliens being in any way related to us, except as neighbors, as far as I know. But okay, so what was your contact with Indrid Cold after? How old were you, and what happened?
Well, now if I told you that, I would ruin the book that I'm writing.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if you can tell us anything,
let's just say you have to buy the book. It was. I'll give you a little sneak peek.
Well, we'll give you a chance to promote the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I was 30 years old, and no, I was 29. I wasn't quite 30, and I was in the midst of a divorce. Actually, I guess there were a couple of different contacts. There was when my father passed away, I had a contact that night.
I see.
Okay. I was sitting on my mother's couch. My children and I were living with my mom in a mobile home, and there was a knock on the door. And I opened it, and there was this gentleman all dressed in black, and it's like I remember Indrid Cold being, and he just looked at me and he kind of walked away, and I didn't really know anything though until the next day.
Oh, that's interesting, because one of the features of the Mothman incidents in the valley during the whole flap was the Men in Black incidents that reported by many people, coming to their doors. But you believe this was actually Indrid Cold?
Yes, it looked like what I remembered Indrid Cold to look like, just a little bit older.
Okay.
Mr. Cold, what was explained to me at that time, I still call him Mr. Cold, it was explained to me, I asked my father one time, many years later, when all that Men in Black stuff was coming out more, why Indrid wore black, and he told me it was to blend in with the Men in Black. Because mostly what he wore was a white turtleneck T-shirt, sometimes a white dress shirt with a black tie, a black trench coat with black shiny pants that, rock stars would have worn back in the 80s, and a black hat.
Okay. Ben's got the next question here.
Okay, so, Taunia, do you really believe that Indrid Cold was what he said he was?
Yeah, I mean, what are we really looking at here, cutting to the chase?
Sure, why wouldn't I? I mean, he popped up in so many strange places, and I know, like I said, my mother, when she was ill, she told me, she said one thing that stood out of everything was that she would take my brother and I shopping, and as soon as she pulled into the driveway, my father would come out of the house, and my father would be able to tell her everyone she talked to and everything she bought and everywhere she went, which she thought was a little strange.
Oh, that's interesting. One of the reasons for the question is that we, in our work, and I've been working in the paranormal in general for almost going on 41 years now, not too much with UFOs, but sometimes the phenomena seem to overlap, is, in my opinion, in our opinion I should say, nothing in the paranormal is what it appears to be. We always ask if things really are what they seem to be when we encounter any sort of entity or phenomenon or whatever. And so we tend not to take things at face value, hence the idea, do you think this could have been something other than what it appeared to be? That was the reason for the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, there were quite a few ufologists that believed my father and thought that it was what it appeared to be. I mean, Gray Barker for one, and like I said, Earl Neff from the Cleveland Ufology Project, and John Keel as well.
Yeah, what you said though was just now was very interesting about your father knowing things he wouldn't usually know. Was that a pattern with him? And did it happen with your mother or you? Presumably simply from contact with Indrid Cold, his, if you want to say, for lack of a better term, his psychic abilities improved? Is that how you'd put it?
It happened with me as I was growing up. You know, my father would call and say, I understand you're worried about this, or what's going on with that, which was, you know, which kind of freaked me out as I got older. It did happen quite often with my mother when she would go out to the store.
Okay.
Or go out somewhere.
All right. I don't know if you have something else, Ben, because I was going to ask about...
Oh, no, go for it.
Okay. One of the things, Taunia, that we are looking at, and we are relatively new to the UFO scene, you know, within the paranormal, because our usual work is with the so-called ghost phenomena and stuff, is that the nature of it seems to have changed since the 1940s when it really got going in this country. You know, at that time, as you know, people were seeing what they called flying saucers. When there would be contacts, there would be reports of similar incidents to what you've just been talking about with your father. Relatively humanoid-looking people coming up to someone, expressing "we come in peace" kind of thing, and talking with them and learning about their world, all the way up to grays and abductions and more negative things happening. And now today, there seems to be another morphing of the UFO phenomena into just plain lights that people are seeing, and at least to us, sounds a lot like a lot of characteristics of the ghost phenomena that people sometimes report. What's your interpretation of how the UFO phenomenon seems to have changed since your father had this incident, or has it changed? Are we just looking at it differently?
I think it's changed as there's not as many contacts, and I think that's because, you know, we've since all the Area 51 stuff, we've scared these people off. Besides that, you know, the technology has changed. I do know that my father said that the people from Lanulus were far more technologically advanced than we were. Because, I mean, now you've got UFOs that look like stealth fighters.
Mm-hmm. They could be stealth fighters, and who knows?
Yeah, they could be stealth fighters, except for the fact that stealth fighters, to my knowledge, don't hover.
Right.
And I know one night here in West Virginia, back in, I think it was 2004, my daughter ran into the house. She's 21 now. And she ran in the house scared, and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Mom, I think I just saw a UFO." I said, "Well, what did you see?" And she told me what she saw, and I picked up the phone and I called Susan Shepard. I said, "If you get any reports from any of your people about this, please let me know." Okay. And apparently she didn't, but I told her, I said, "I'm sure what you just saw was a UFO. I know I can be driving down the highway and look up in the air and see what I believe is a UFO. I do know that my father, before he passed away, did tell me that Indrid Cole told him one time that I would always be watched. I would always be taken care of."
Mm-hmm. Kind of like a guardian angel sort of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I know that some things have happened, some really strange things, like, you know, there are a few people who kept in touch with my father over the years, and one gentleman in Massachusetts in particular, and for Christmas, I got a letter from him, and he said, "I understand you're short on Christmas money for the boys, so here's $100. Now, I've never spoken with this guy. I don't know how he knew that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
You know, it's little things like that.
Yeah, all right. Okay, on our CBS edition last night, we did a whole show on the paranormal and the family, and we dealt with our own loss in our family recently, and because people are always asking us, how they should deal with losses in their family, and the shoe was on the other foot. And we also dealt with issues whereby, we had one email from a lady whose son, as she found out, was involved in some really negative cult, and then we had an email from a young boy who found out his parents were involved in some weird cult. What does he do? So this has all aspects to it. So the effect of paranormal events on a family are always of interest to us. So when it comes to your family, you mentioned that your mother and father eventually divorced, which unfortunately is a common thing today. Do you think that these incidents had an effect on your family that may have led to that?
Oh, I know they did. Mom had just had enough of people with shotguns around the house and in the backyard.
Yeah.
Getting unlisted phone numbers and people getting them anyway. And so when Earl Neff came down from Cleveland, he brought a gentleman named Bob Lalonde with him. And, well, I don't like to speak too much of Bob Lalonde. He ended up being the stepfather from you-know-where.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he basically talked my mother into going back to Cleveland with him, with my brother and I, and from there they got, is when they got a divorce. But yeah, I know that. In fact, my mother even told me she just couldn't take the pressure of all the people around and everything anymore.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. And also on the issue of a more family-oriented question, your own children, have they demonstrated any particular, if as I say, for lack of a better term, psychic abilities, or any indication that they have invisible friends or visible friends in the sense of somebody like Indrid Cold? Has there been any ongoing phenomena in your family of the kind that occurred in 1966?
No.
Okay. Well, I have a funny feeling you're
No.
lucky.
I do know that I see a lot of shadow people.
Okay.
And I did speak with Rosemary Guiley about it at a psychic fair that Susan Shepard and some people put on. And Rosemary Guiley told me that it could possibly be because the outline is of a tall guy in a fedora-type hat. And she told me that it could possibly be Indrid Cold. And since he promised my father he would always watch over me,
Yeah.
that could very well be what those shadow people are.
Well, one thing that a little, I don't know, I'm not going to say bothers me, but that I'm sure Ben will agree, the question arises, if these are descendants of ours on this planet, where does he get all these powers to come and go? I suppose if they're using what we would call the multiverse to, come and go through various membranes of different worlds, I suppose that would explain it. But it just seems there seems to be a lot of semi-supernatural powers on the part of somebody who looks and claims to be pretty human. What say you?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't have an answer for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's an honest.
It's a tough question.
It is. Yeah. Okay. All right, Ben. Do you have any other thing that I'm missing here? Or?
Well, you said you're working on a book. What are you writing it about exactly?
About my experiences with this whole thing.
Okay.
Because I have revised my father's Visitors from Lanulus book, and I do have it for sale too. What I've done with it is I've basically taken the original manuscript and retyped the original manuscript and added. I found a clearinghouse in Sweden that had all kinds of eyewitness reports and police reports and medical reports on my father and all kinds of. I mean, they sent me over 100 pages of information, and I have added a lot of that into my dad's book.
Okay. All right. When will that appear?
Well, Visitors from Lanulus, the revised version, is available now. I'm still working on mine. I was hoping to have it done by now, but I wasn't planning on getting sick.
Oh no, of course not. Yeah.
Or sicker. So I'm working on it now, actually, as I sit in the hospital with nothing to do. So I'm hoping.
Well, we're glad you gave some time to us. No, we have further questions, but I also wanted to give you a chance to tell our listeners about how they can help the cause against multiple sclerosis.
They can just go on my Facebook under Taunia Derenberger and find out, and there's information on it on there.
Okay, because we like to promote charities as much as we can.
Yeah, or they can go to nmss.org and make a donation there.
Okay, all right, and also. Okay, well, I wanted to make sure we covered that because I didn't want to run out of time before we get to that. Those are important matters. I did have another question for you, just as an observer of the UFO scene that you are. One time, well, I don't know. Very often we've discussed the impression that there are so many different kinds of UFOs, so many different kinds of reported alien contacts, they seem to be almost tailor-made for individual people. There are, of course, similarities and commonalities among many stories, but why, in your opinion, if you have an opinion on this, are there so many different kinds of alien contacts and UFO types of craft, and so many different stories, so much information that sometimes conflicts? I mean, what's your opinion on that? I mean, who's pulling whose leg here, or is Indrid Cold right and other aliens right? I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. That's a tough one too. It's hard to say. I don't know if people are trying to mold their stories around what they think will pique the interest of the population, or if they're, I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
It's hard to tell.
No, that's honest enough. In your experience with Indrid Cold and in your father's, as far as you know, were there any predictions made? And the reason I ask, of course, is because 2012 looms darkly ahead, and if any, maybe nothing will happen, but there are other people who think other things are going to happen. Was there anything by way of a prediction made in any of the dialogue that occurred between your father and Indrid Cold that you know of?
No.
Okay, well, that might be just as well. Okay, very good. Okay, Taunia, we're going to move on here, and we want to thank you so very much for being with us in your situation. We wish you the very, very best in your hospital stay and in your health.
Yes, we hope you feel better.
I just want to get home.
Of course. Well, we're with you.
I've been here for a week. I'm expected to be here the rest of the week, so I just want to get home.
I've been there, done that. I know it's nothing you want more than to get home. And the last place to get any sort of rest is in a hospital. I found that out.
I know when they're constantly coming in. And, I mean, I am black and blue from one end of my arm to the other from IVs and blood work and everything else.
Well, so. God bless you, kid. We're thinking about you and praying for you. But thank you for being with us. And we'll talk to you again soon. We want to do this again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with the book.
Goodbye.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Goodbye.
Taunia Derenberger, everyone. Taunia Derenberger Bowman, and you can check her Facebook page, or just look her up in the Google method, and that way you'll be able to find out how not only the amazing story she has to tell, but also how to help people who, like herself, who suffer from multiple sclerosis, and all the many causes that she works for. Now, we do have a couple of emails we want to get to before the end of the show here, and this one is from Mel S. in Brooklyn, New York, and Mel is talking about things moving.
Hit the mic by accident. That was a close one. Okay. I have listened to many of your shows, and I always enjoy your stories of the multiverse and how things can move because of those energies. But then I moved into an apartment where that happened all the time, and I mean all the time. Nothing ever stays where I put it. I come home from work and put my keys down, then I turn around and they're gone. I put a bottle of juice in the fridge and it disappears for 3 or 4 days. I put a chair in the kitchen, and when I come out of the shower, it's in the living room. Even the cat will be out on the balcony one minute and in the kitchen the next, right through closed doors. Nothing feels spooky or dangerous. It's just so annoying that it's driving me crazy, and I'm thinking of moving so I can find a way out of my lease. Well, I can't afford to lose the deposit. What do you think is causing all of this?
Well, Mel, I must say that certainly does sound annoying, but unfortunately we do hear this from time to time. Much as we were discussing with Taunia Derenberger, the area of the thank heaven, not the Blackstone Valley, but the Ohio Valley, in which her town is located, and the whole place where the Mothman things occurred, seems to be a very active area for the intersection of many worlds, as we would call it, where these things are in, suppose you have an intersection of one of these bubble worlds that quantum physics talks about. You come in, you put down your keys, a world boundary crosses, and in that world, that's not where you put your keys. You put them somewhere else, right? And it's not elves, it's not gremlins, probably not poltergeists. You probably just live in a very active area that way. Now, we are always looking at ways where this can be prevented. Ben has developed, if I may say, a technique for what we call moving portals, which we're not prepared to talk entirely about right now, but we've been trying that in one particular case where you can exercise some control over the interlapping worlds, so to speak, that might be occurring in your area. I would look into this. Do you have a high water table where you live? Now, of course, you're in Brooklyn, so heaven only knows. But do you have neighbors who are having similar incidents? Now, the problem is you can't just walk up to your neighbor, hey, do you have, weird stuff going on and things moving around the house without being asked to, things of that kind. But if you have a chance, find out about that and let us know. But I think you may just have just by bad luck, moved into an area that has a very active electromagnetic fields and a very active almost flap kind of situation where worlds are intersecting. And I think it might be just as simple as that, if you can call that simple. So I would say keep an eye on it. I'm very glad to hear that you do not have any sense of danger or sense of presences or anything of this kind, and that you probably are just a victim of the wonders of quantum mechanics. That seems to be how the world is set up, kind of like Swiss cheese. So keep us posted on that, Mel. And I would just say you might want to look into moving, because you don't want to be annoyed like this for heaven knows how long. So I would say maybe look into that, but keep us posted too if it should change. This does not seem to be something that is following you from what you indicate, and that's a good sign as well. So I think you're just, as I say, a victim of quantum mechanics here. All right, here's another one. This is Two Ghosts, and this is from Sherry K. in Tennessee.
Okay. Yeah. So Sherry writes to us, my father died 2 years ago, and I've always followed your advice about being careful and skeptical when I have paranormal experiences. But things have really gotten strange lately. Every few nights I wake up and see my father, or what looks like my father, standing at the foot of my bed. It doesn't feel threatening, and I feel very positive about it. I poke my husband when this happens, but no matter what I do, he doesn't wake up. Funny thing is, he's usually a light sleeper. As positive as I feel about the appearance, and the more it seems to convey to me that it is my father, something in me is doubtful. Then, just after Christmas, my daughter and I went to stay at my sister's for a week to help her with her kids because she has a broken leg. While I was asleep there, I woke up 2 nights in a row with someone standing at the foot of my bed, and I heard my name in my father's voice. But this one felt completely different from the one I was seeing in my own house. Before I left to go home, my sister said she had seen the same thing. What do you and Ben think is going on here?
That's very interesting.
Yes.
I've very seldom heard of that. I've heard of it before. 2 ghosts, quote unquote, of apparently the same person appearing in 2 different places but not seeming to be the same at all. Now, I hate to say it, Sherry, but this appears to be a classic textbook exercise by what we refer to as parasites, negative entities that push buttons and are non-human and try to literally eat by the energy that you produce.
So your gut is correct because
always follow your gut.
Yes, you have that doubtful feeling. Therefore, you are right.
Yeah. Absolutely. Pay attention to your feelings.
Yes.
And the very fact you've got 2 possible, because it's your sister's house, but 2 possible non-human parasitical entities pretending to be your father. This is very, very common in the sense that they often do pretend to be a loved one. The voice, they will learn about you and they'll say things you'll think only your father would know. This is the real thing. This is the real stuff that we run into. And this is what I was telling Taunia Derenberger during our interview. You just can't trust these things. I don't trust them, and nothing in the paranormal is what it appears to be. That's what really bothers me when people do these awful things that they shouldn't do, like seances and Ouija boards, and they believe what they're told. Big mistake. More trouble results from that than you can imagine. So, what would be your advice here, Ben, for Sherry? Just
don't listen to it.
Yeah.
Once you get its number, it'll completely change tactics and stop being your father, quote unquote, and everything will just change. The entire situation will change, and then just stay positive and pray.
I've had that happen. And something comes across like some relative, and I'll make it known I don't believe you're this, and everything changes.
Yes.
Now, what you want to do is not necessarily have it change. You want it to end. Right?
Yeah.
So what you do, as we said on our family show last night, come together with your family, pray, love each other, do all kinds of positive things. And funny, we saw our good friend Father Anthony Perkins today, and he's been on our show before, and he said something I'll never forget, and it's so apt. You know, when you're dealing with these cases, if you tell these people to stand in their yard naked, swing a chicken around their heads, and that they'll do it. But then if you tell them just to love each other and take care of each other, they don't get it. But the real answer is not the chicken, it's the love and the respect. Build that in your family, and you build a defense that nothing can penetrate.
Yeah, we're not telling you to stand in your yard and naked and swing a chicken around.
No, by no means.
Yes, please do not do that.
All right. So again, Sherry, keep us posted on this, and you seem to have a very good gut for this kind of thing, and I'd stick with it. All right, there we go. Okay.
We have about 5 minutes.
Got about 5. Okay, let's do a little paranormal news here from our good friend Lon Strickler of phantomsandmonsters.com. Lon is an amazing source of information on the strange events that would fit all the interests of our show, certainly. Here's one. This is a humanoid or cryptid encounter of a critter known as the Iowa Goat Man.
Oh, I've heard this.
Oh, you were saying, isn't it funny, or was it you were the cryptid?
No, that was
put
me.
Man in back of
Yeah,
lizard man, frog man,
insert animal. Yeah, insert animal, and then add man to the end of it.
So whether this is what it's, I don't know. Anyway, the following accounts are previous humanoid cryptid encounter reports received by various agencies worldwide, and that Lon is reporting here. Now, this reportedly occurred near Norway, Iowa, in mid-December of 2002. Okay, we're a little late reporting this. Sorry about that. The witness was on his way home late one night after work. He almost always walked the train tracks because they were a straight shot towards the house. These tracks ran past a cemetery, which was alleged to be haunted, an old settler cemetery. It's already dark and had been for many hours, and there was no moon that night. As the witness walked near the cemetery, he started hearing muffled footsteps behind him, but did not think much of it. Plenty of other people walk home this way as well, so he kept going, and the footsteps got louder and louder. Around midway past the cemetery, he got nervous, and the steps were getting closer. So he turned to look behind him, and according to the witness, he saw a, quote, goat man, or, quote, the devil himself, unquote. He described this thing as a man who basically had goat hooves and horns along the lines of the mythical Pan, the god Pan, Romans worshipped. And this thing was heading straight for him. Reportedly, all the snow around this creature was instantly melting as it walked through. The witness ran screaming, quote, like a banshee, unquote. I always say like a banshee with a toothache. Anyway, he hears the clopping. He heard the clopping of the beast's footsteps behind him, speeding up and catching up with him as he ran. Finally, he got past the graveyard and saw the thing step right off at the edge of the cemetery. He continued to run, that's the witness that is, stopping to look back, and the beast just vanished. One of his older co-workers confided with the witness that there was a tale about a goat man many years ago. It was supposedly a Polish immigrant who disappeared one night but returned as the creature several years later. There have been UFO and strange reports also around the same time.
Let me interject a little bit. Sure. There's another legend of some other cryptid called the Pope Lick Monster, and apparently it's the same thing, and it also haunts railroad tracks. And it's actually, it like lures people to their dooms with its voice and pretends to be loved ones, and then people end up like looking for the people that are like stuck on the tracks, quote unquote, and then they just sort of get hit by trains, and they see this crazy goat thing before they get hit by the train.
If they've been hit by the train, how does anybody know what they saw?
I don't know. It's just a legend.
All right. No, well, again, how much time do we have?
We have 2 minutes.
Okay. 2 minutes. Okay. I know I can't look at a clock.
A minute and 40.
All right. But certainly we have a lot of strange things going on in this world, and of course, naturally the criticism arises, well, you have one person reporting this, and yeah, a person certainly can make things up and imagine things, but when other people report it, that's it. But decide for yourself. So okay, we're just about ready for our closing here. We're just about out of time, and we had a pretty good show here. I want to thank Taunia for being with us. So we want to thank our producer, Steve Bianchi, our new producer, and we'll see you next Monday, April 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, right here on ON 1240 AM, onworldwide.com.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.